Alright troops, VR Vampy here, welcome back to the channel, or if you're new here, welcome to the channel. We are continuing on with the series of Legacy of Kain. We are now on Soul Reaver 2. Now this is going to be a long one, guys, because the cutscenes alone are like an hour and 15 minutes. I will try and get through the story as quick as I can, because it's going to be a pain in the butt to edit alone. But this was released in 2001. It was developed by Crystal Dynamics and it was published by Eidos Interactive. Now, Soul Reaver 2 is very much the same, I would say, as Soul Reaver 1. It's a single player action adventure game. We continue on the story as our main character, Raziel, looking for revenge against Kain. In the end of the last game, we met up with Kain. We almost defeated him, but he turned a portal on and he jumped through it. And we followed him because we didn't want to miss the chance of getting our revenge. And when we went through, we met Mobius, the time streamer. So, before we get into the rest of the story, we're going to speak about the gameplay again. As we always do, we go through bit by bit. So, let's start with the gameplay. So, gameplay. Gameplay is not much different from first one. We retain most of our abilities that we gained in killing our brethren in the first one. We're still able to scale walls. We're still able to move things with, you know, our telekinetic powers and things like that. The only difference this time, and it does kind of come into the story, as I will explain when I go through the story, is at a certain point in the game, not too far into the game, your Reaver will not disappear when you are hit. It will always stay out, but you now have the choice of feeding yourself souls when you need it, when you're hit and you're injured, or your Reaver will take the souls. So it's kind of like we have to be careful now because it's almost like the Reaver's trying to consume us. You are basically fighting for survival against this Reaver that used to be your weapon, and now it's kind of like, as Kain says himself, a parasite. You know, kind of fighting to win. So that is the only difference, I would say. We're still able to go into different realms. And nothing else really changes power-wise. Save point-wise, in this one, you will see like kind of a post with like a circle in this one, and you lift up your saber and it will like put a wee glow into light, and that is kind of like your save point. There will be places like there was in the first one where you can teleport to go back and forward to different places in the game, like in Soul Reaver as well. So there's no really much of a difference. This game is very much the same, I would say, as the first one. I think until you get to a point where it's kind of like it's less of Raziel trying to get revenge and more Raziel trying to get information about himself, sort of thing. But gameplay wise, pretty much the same. We retain most of our powers, so let's move on to the story. So the story, guys. Now, the story is we are 30 years before the events of Blood Omen. 30 years. This means Kain is not even born yet. Okay, the pillars are still standing and Nosgoth is good. Circular 9, who look after the pillars, are all still alive and everything is cushy. Vorador is still alive as well. So, first person we meet when we go through the portal is Mobius, the time streamer, who is one of the Circle of 9 he's a circle of 9 for the time. That rhymed. Anyway, and as soon as we come out, he goes, Raziel, Redeemer and Destroyer, Pawn and Messiah. So, why is he saying this to us? Because he clearly has seen already Raziel's past and future. So, he knows something that we don't at that time. And straight away, he tells Raziel that he is a friend, and he's unexpected that Raziel attacks him, because Raziel tries to attack him with the Soul Reaver, but it disappears because, as we remember, Mobius has a staff, and a staff means, when he has his staff with him, it means that vampires can't touch him. So it has this effect on his Soul Reaver, but it doesn't have an effect on the fact that Raziel can attack him, physically attack him. So he says, very well, if you would rather I use my hands, and he basically pins Mobius up against the wall with his like claws. And this is when Mobius is like, oh, this is really unexpected, because he thought that he wouldn't be able to attack him for the fact that he had his staff. And he says to him, it's curious that, you know, my staff who stops vampires has the same ability to stop your Soul Reaver, but no him. And this is because he's not a vampire anymore. But he basically says to him that, you know, he comes in peace, like he's his friend and stuff like that. And Raziel quickly tells him that he knows about him. You know, he knows he's very good at trying to control the narrative, so to speak. And Mobius is like, you know, who has slandered me so? Your master, you know. And Raziel asks him how he knows his name, because they've never met before. And Mobius says, on the contrary, I knew you very well. In fact, we were really close. I knew you when you were the Sarafin priest. And he said something like, we actually loved each other. And Raziel's like, you know, sort of thing. So when Raziel looks about, he notices that they're in the Sarafin temple. So he says to him, is this the Sarafin temple? Because remember, we went to the Sarafin temple back in Soul Reaver, but it was like in ruins at that time. And that's when he found his own tomb and his brethren's tomb, and realised that they were actually Sarafin priests, all of them. So Mobius explains to Raziel that, yeah, it used to be, but it's not now. That now it's basically used with his army to try and kill vampires. Because if we jump back, and if you haven't watched my first Blood Omen video, go and watch it first, I'll link that below. But back then, we know that Mobius tricks Kain into going back in time to kill William the Just. When he does that, he causes Mobius to cause like a genocidal kind of army who is wanting to kill all the vampires. And this is how so many vampires get wiped out. It was Kain's fault, because Kain believed everything Mobius told him and went back in time. And remember, they told us that William the Just at first was a kind king. He was a good king. It wasn't until later on he became more corrupted by Mobius and mean, and people didn't like him. But that is not when Kain killed him. Kain went back in time and killed him when he was known as a noble king. So because he was killed by a vampire, Mobius was able to get all these people to agree and to hate vampires, and to start an entire army to basically kill all the vampires. So this is obviously before that happens, but you know. Anyway, so he then notices pictures on the wall, and it's like Vorador, and he asks, is this the vampire known as Vorador? And Mobius says yes, he's a vile beast, and he had killed 6 of the Circle of 9. and only 3 of them managed to escape, him being one of them. And Raziel was kind of like, oh, really? That was convenient. He just doesn't trust him. Raziel knows not to trust Mobius. So Mobius is really, trying his best to get Raziel to kill Kain. He shows him Kain standing at the pillars, and he's kind of egging him on, saying, look, there he's there, standing at the very pillars that he's destined to basically leave corrupted and let Nosgoth 40 pieces into a wasteland, because he's unaware that Mobius pulled Raziel at the time stream to see him first before he basically came face to face again with Kain. But Raziel is no daft. He isn't, he knows Mobius is obviously got another plan, why he wants Kain to die. And he is not really listening. And Mobius ends up saying, look, let's never mind rekindling our friendship, but let's at least be allies. Because we both have a common enemy and we both want to see Kain dead. With that, Raziel continues on to the temple, and he enters a room where he sees big stained glass windows. So when he walks into the next room, his Reaver comes back. And this is because he explains he's away from Mobius and his staff. And he wonders how this staff that is meant to immobilise vampires has the effect that it has on his Reaver. And he then speaks about how powerful he now realises that Mobius is having this staff, and this is how he's managed to wipe out so many vampires, to have the power to actually mobilise vampires. So it would just be like a massacre. It wouldn't even be a battle. It would just be like, killing statues, mannequins, because there's nothing that they would be able to do to protect themselves. So he starts getting this feeling of displacement, and he says it's almost like a vertigo. And as he walks forward, we see a big stained glass window, and it's got Kain on one side and William the Just on the other in this big battle. And then we see a tomb, like an old stone grave, and it's William the Just's grave. And on top of it is the Soul Reaver, the bladed Soul Reaver, and it's broken. And he goes on about how he heard about the battle between, Kain and that, and he never thought it was possible to actually see the Soul Reaver broken until Kain had actually struck him with it, and then it broke as well. But as he's reaching his hand out, you can see his Reaver starting to come out and kind of recoiling round the Reaver, starting to repair it. He starts to repair it, and then Raziel grabbing it really quickly and not being able to let it go, and just all this power going through the Reaver and the actual sword Reaver. And you know what? At that time, I was like, this is cool. We're going to have like the Reaver and the sword attached to her hand. But that's not the case. So as he realises, he's in a bit of trouble here because everything's been drained out of him to repair this Reaver, and the fact that his Reaver's coiling over this other Reaver. Just before he's about to die, because as he said, the Reaver isn't that daft to kill the person who's obviously it's attached to. But he's no happy, and who's standing behind him? Mobius again. So he thinks this has been Mobius's plan, and Mobius hasn't got his staff. So straight away he's like to Mobius, this was your plan, you did this to me. Mobius is like, no, I never did this to you. This was nothing to do with me. This is all Kain's doing, blah, blah, blah. Nothing to do with me. All this sort of stuff. And Raziel notices that Mobius is trembling and is like, oh, you know, there's a bit of fear in your eyes. Have you made a fatal mistake by coming here without your staff? So he's like prepared 100% to kill Mobius at that time. And Mobius is begging. And at this point, guys, I don't know if any of you ever noticed, but is Mobius no get like the biggest hands that you've ever seen? He's got massive horns and tiny wee arms. And I think it was only at this point where he's like, Raziel, I beg you to steady your hand. That I was like, look at the size of his horns and his tiny wee arms. It's weird the things that you actually spot when you watch for a second time. He's like, no, you did this. This is your plan, blah, blah, blah. And then Mobius says, you know, something about the Circle of Fate, basically. And he's like, what did you say? And he says, the Circle of Fate. He says, we serve the same God. Because both Mobius basically worships the Elder God. And the Elder God is the person who brought Raziel back to kill Kain. And the Elder God told Raziel that he brought him back and that Kain needs to die because he's not able to put souls in the Circle of Fate for them to go wherever it is they're meant to go to be reborn into places and all that sort of stuff. So he basically says we serve the same God. But Raziel at this point, he doesn't want to kill him, but he's also not bothered about everything he's saying. He's just like, look, I'm tired of you. He says the fact that I know that you fear me is enough, and he starts walking away. And you know, Mobius is still going on about, you know, go and kill Kain, blah, 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 and he's the person who made you like this, blah, blah, all this sort of stuff. And, you know, Raziel turns around and says, look, I don't need any inspiration to go and kill Kain for you. It was always his plan anyway, and he continues on away. Now, this is the point now, guys, where Raziel explains that the Reaver now is always... whether he gets hit or no, we always have the Reaver, which I thought was good because it annoyed me in the first one that you only had the Reaver when you were, when you basically passed to the spectral realm. But if you get hit in the material realm, you lost it straight away unless you got ate a soul when your life became full, when it would come back. This time, you have the choice, and your choice is to feed yourself or to feed your Reaver, because your Reaver wants the souls as well as you. So it's kind of like a battle, and this is what he said. The Reaver's becoming so strong, it's like a battle between both of them. It's no a weapon anymore, it's more like a parasite, and it's trying to take over. So, in a way it's good, because you always have your Reaver. You don't have to use any of the other weapons and stuff like that. You always have your Reaver, but you have to make the choice whether to feed your Reaver or, you know, vice versa sort of thing. So as we continue on, we see more stained glass windows. And next we see a depiction of Janis Aldrin. So Janis Aldrin. We first hear the name Janis Aldrin in Blood Omen, and we hear it when Kain is going through the very beginning of the game. He's going through a tomb trying to get to the people who assassinated them, and you pick up a card that looks like a black heart. And this is when he explains that the black heart belonged to Janis Aldrin, who was the most powerful vampire ever. And this is all we really know. And when you pick it up, he explains that it basically gives you full health. So that's telling us that basically it's a powerful thing if you do pick it up. So this time when we see the stained glass window, Raziel is basically explaining that Janis Aldrin is an ancient vampire. So he was born a vampire, he was not made a vampire, and he was very powerful. but depicted in the stained glass window as if he is basically attacking innocent people, and this is why the Seraphim basically hunted him down and ripped out his black heart, and knew they protect it so it doesn't get into the hands. He also explains that he lives up in the mountains high in Nosgoth, and basically that he wasn't sure if he was as monstrous as the Seraphim are depicting in the picture or the stories are told. It's basically just mere for the humans to see and the humans to believe how monstrous he possibly could have been. And he explains that the Black Heart has the ability to give any vampire life back as well, including obviously Janos Aldrin. If he retrieves his black heart, he will come back to life. So in the next room, when we go in, is a chapel, and as Raziel looks about, you see pictures of Seraphim priests kind of kneeling, and he notices it's his brothers. And it's like a depiction, you know, of his brothers, where people come and kind of worship and like thank them for like what they did when they were alive. And as he looks forward, he sees for the first time, because he's never seen or remembers his human form, he sees a statue of himself as a Seraphim priest. And he says it kills him to see himself looking so innocent and noble, that he now just has a rage inside him. He wants to find Kain and he wants to kill Kain, and this is exactly where he heads. So he heads to the Pillars of Nosgoth, because obviously that's where Mobius showed him, standing, waiting for him. And as he goes through, he sees like a whole lot of vampires that have been staked and that have been, heads have been cut off, they've died in all kind of ways. And this is kind of Raziel's first glimpse of how the Seraphim actually work, that these vampires were no killed in any type of battle, that they were basically just, you know, tortured and killed, and knowing the noble way of like war and things like that, kind of cowardly way of killing people, or killing vampires. And then we see Kain standing at the Pillars of Nosgoth. So he's ready. He's trying to sneak up on Kain, but Kain knows he's there. So he's telling him to turn and face him. Raziel believes that no, even Kain should be stabbed in the back, basically. So he wants to face him and fight. Kain is not interested in fighting, because at this moment he wants to show Raziel something. And he basically just asks them to listen to him, to be still. And he tells them, in that moment, Ariel, the Guardian of Balance, who's one of the Circle of Nine, is being murdered. And as she's been murdered, Napraptor finding her body and goes mad. And his madness, obviously, goes to the rest of the circle. And now they're all mad. He explains to Raziel that this is the moment. This is the moment that his life changed, because when Ariel was murdered, he was the next one chosen by birth to take over as the balance, you know, the circle of balance. So he was to look after the pillar of balance. He's trying to explain that he was already tainted and would never be able to fulfill that job, because that madness then spread onto him, because he was now officially a Circle of Nine, whether he was a baby or no or whatever. So he would have never have been able to do anything about the pillars at that time. But this is when Raziel turns around and says, but you knew when it came to a time that you could, then you could have sacrificed yourself and saved the pillars. And Kain's like, yeah, you're right, but then the vampires, we would have no vampires. And Raziel's like, the pillars are more important, even you said that yourself. But Kain is trying to explain the pillars belong to the vampires. The vampires were the one who made the pillars. They don't belong to the humans, they don't belong to anybody else. So Kain in a way is trying to explain to Raziel that nobody else should have the control of the pillars because the pillars were made by the vampires. He believes that at his time, he could not take his own life for the pillars, to save the pillars, to save Nosgoth, because he didn't want to have no vampires and humans looking after the pillars, because he believes it should be the vampires because the vampires made it in the first place. And the reason the vampires made it was to stop the Howden. The Howden for getting through to Nosgoth to be trapped in the demon realm. And the reason that vampires became immortal and couldn't have anything to do with the Circle of Fate because they were now immortal and they don't die with old age was because that was the curse that the Howden gave them as basically as a revenge for making the pillars to stop them from getting in. So it's all very confusing, guys. It's very confusing, but anyway, he's just trying to get Raziel to understand his side as well as anything else. He just wants them to listen to him to explain, but there's so much hate in Raziel, and Kain says that there's nothing wrong with hate and revenge, but basically be honest about it, you know. So at this point we're at a standstill. As Kain is explaining that either way somebody would lose whatever choice he made, when it came to him having to choose basically destroying himself to make the pillars, you know, be restored, or basically no. To Raziel, he says if he had restored the pillars, there would be no more vampires. And if obviously there was one vampire and then he never restored the pillars, then Nosgoth would obviously become a wasteland. So either way, nobody would win. But Raziel says, but remember, we always discussed the pillars were important to the land. And he agrees. Kain agrees. Hence why he's came back full circle. You know, they've came back in time. He wants to try and sort it, him and Raziel together. And he explains to Raziel that there is a third option, but it's a secret. And he can't tell Raziel what that option is because Raziel has to figure it out for himself. And then he disappears. Now, the one thing that I noticed about this conversation is we've always got the Elder God talking about the circle of fate. Whereas I feel like Kain talks about it in different. He calls it the circle of destiny. So we have somebody who's saying it's your fate and it's your destiny, which is kind of the same thing, but Kain keeps telling us that there's no such thing as free will, and I think this is because he felt as though he didn't really have a choice when it came to that, because something bad was going to happen, and this is what he was going to explain. Either there was going to be no vampires, or like the land was going to be cursed for the, you know. So he leaves us anyway, and basically then Raziel is left pondering everything that he said. So at this point, Raziel is definitely saying that he's not going to become a pawn in anything that Kain says, but he is interested in finding any secrets that may be within the land. So this is what he's going to do. And as he's walking, he gets the feeling that he's being watched. He sees like three like weird looking birds, like kind of white crows, standing about, and he feels like, you know, he's just got a feeling of being watched. And then he comes to this big door. It's like a big tomb, and there's a person painted on this tomb, and it looks like him. It's got like blue skin, it's got wings, it's got like the 3 claws for his hand, and it has like an indentation that he kind of works out that's where the soul reaver's to go, and he puts his soul reaver in and it opens and he's able to go in. So when basically Raziel goes into this tomb, he sees depictions, pictures on the wall, and he sees these winged beings that look like him, but as he says, more beautiful and angelic, whereas his is more kind of monstrous, because obviously with the abyss did to his skin and stuff like that. And he obviously doesn't know what the battle is, but he realises it's some battle, and what he's actually seen is the depiction of the battle between the ancient vampires and the Hilden. The ancient vampires are the ones that are blue with the big black wings, just like obviously how he had ended up evolving and passing Kain with the wings, except that his was like bat wings and theirs were like feathers. A battle between the ancient vampires and the Hilden, and then we're seeing like the blue beings building the pillars, because they were the ones who put their powers into the pillars to help the land and to obviously trap the Hilden. And then we see a curse, like blood, a bloodthirst curse, which Raziel explains, and this is the curse that they gave to the vampires and made them immortal, so they could only survive by drinking blood and they couldn't die unless it was like sun, water, the usual stake to the heart, or the usual vampiric things. So this is what he's seen at this time, which I'm surprised he doesn't know about it, because I thought that Kain would have known about it, and Kain was always one for telling stories and stuff like that. But this is definitely the first time that Raziel was seeing this, because he doesn't know what it is that he's actually looking at. But because they look like him, he's very, very curious to what it was. So we were there, and obviously Raziel's kind of speaking it loud about maybe this is what the thing that Kain wanted Raziel to find out, the secret about himself. We hear a voice, and it's a voice that we recognise. It's the Elder God. And where Raziel's standing, there's water all around him, and underneath the water is the Elder God there. And Raziel starts saying, oh, you know, it's kind of weird how you suddenly turned up here, and I was kind of hoping I wouldn't see you again. And this is when the Elder God says, I am here eternally everywhere, because obviously he's this turns the wheel, a circle of fate and all that, blah blah blah, the usual stuff. He's the one who makes sure everybody's destiny is their destiny and all that sort of stuff. And Raziel makes a comment that, you know, they're in a time that he doesn't need him anymore, but he's probably guessing that the Elder God needs him. And he's telling him he's not be insolent. It doesn't suit him to be insolent because he wasn't this way before, and that basically he's not to believe the depictions that he sees on the wall, which is kind of weird that he would not want Raziel to believe the things that is on the wall, a temple that's been buried for years that he's in. Seems a bit suspicious. So the Elder God is basically no a happy chappy that Raziel let Kain basically just port away without trying to kill him. And he tells him that he needs to remember that he's got a job to do, and he calls him his little servant. And Raziel says he serves nobody. He does not got to serve Kain. He doesn't serve him. And basically says he's never going to be like Mobius. And calls him his little lackey. And the Elder God says that Mobius is a good servant. And Raziel says, do you think if Mobius found out that he's serving a giant squid that his fate would falter? Which I don't think that I don't think the Elder God really appreciates this. So this is when we really find out that the Elder God hates vampires. He calls them parasites. He calls them an abomination. And this is all because they can't die. So they can't go through the wheel of fate. So he can't like do his job because of them. And he's telling Raziel that, you know, they need to die. All vampires need to die for him to do his job and for everybody to be happy and things to happen the way they're supposed to happen. And at this point, Raziel's just no interested. He just wants to find out secrets. He's no interested right now in what's happening with Kain or what he's to kill Kain. Now he's found something that's interesting to him and possibly gives him answers about himself. He doesn't want to know anything else. So we leave and we go further. We kind of get into like a dark forest. Raziel kind of explains it as in, you know, there's no much light that comes within this forest, and we see yet another tomb. And it's kind of got a symbol on it. So the symbol that's on it, he knows it's one of Mobius's time streaming tombs. And Raziel explains to us that right now he can't get to it, but he feels like within time he will be able to come back and open that tomb to be able to get entry to it. So we see Raziel kicking down a door with his feet, and then he hears a noise and he turns around and he sees a figure. And as soon as the figure notices it's been spotted by Raziel, it teleports away. And Raziel basically explains that finally he found out the person who's been watching them, and he saw enough of his features to realise that it's Vorador, a vampire who killed 6 of the Circle of 9. And he wondered why such a brutal vampire like Vorador, who was able to kill, you know, 6 of the Circle of 9, wouldn't he basically just confront Raziel and is hiding? So Raziel decides that if he will not confront him, that Raziel's going to go to Vorador. In this game, we see a lot of places where we need to go but we can't get to because either some sort of obstacle or we don't have the means yet. We find a lot of ruins that we can use the Reaver on, but this time the Reaver's different. We need to have like a sun Reaver, so you'll get like a door that's got a picture of a sun on it, and then it'll have like a picture of the Reaver. And simply, if your Reaver's like blue, purple, or whatever, you cannot use it. It has to be like yellow to be like the sun Reaver. So there's things that we need to do with the Reaver to be able to then come back and gain entry to certain doors. We'll get there, guys. This is a long game. So in one of these temples, we find another picture, a painting on the wall. And it's another battle between ancient vampires and Hilden. Obviously, at that time, Raziel doesn't know what either of them are. But we also keep seeing the Reaver, the Soul Reaver, as in sword form Reaver, being depicted. And Raziel also says that they're being depicted like they're holy, you know, in some sort of way. And this would probably be because the ancient vampires did see themselves as gods. You know, they were powerful. And it was ancient vampires who also picked humans to pass their powers on to show them how to look after the pillars. So right now, obviously, Raziel doesn't know what they are. He just knows that they look like him and that they're connected to the Reaver. And this is because ancient vampires made the Reaver. And that the pillars and the Reaver have the same energy that the vampires gave them. It's in the Reaver, which is in to, you know, keep the land good and to basically stop the Hildon coming out for the demon realm and coming into the material realm of Nosgoth. So in this tomb, I remember this, there was a lot of puzzles to do with lights where you had to like flip lights and stuff like that. The first one that you get is like the nighttime Reaver, and it's like you flip a light and everything lights up. You've got a massive crystal and it's like a dark energy that ends up getting into an altar. Now this is when Raziel explains that he starts losing control of the Reaver again, and the Reaver takes control and basically puts the Reaver into the altar to consume the dark energy. And the reason that you're doing this is so you can open the doors. Certain temples can't be opened unless you've got the Dark Reaver and it's got a picture of a moon. And like I explained before, later on you will get the light energy, which then allows you to open the doors that's got the picture of the sun. And I think this was like a fun little thing that they done to make the game a bit more interesting. It was a good way to have puzzles, but also to gain something for the puzzles, you know what I mean? And to be able to continue further. And if I remember correctly, there was like these massive pots that were either light or dark. So if you ever needed to change your Reaver to that, you just went over and stuck your Reaver in it and it would change it to dark light and all that sort of stuff to allow you to get entry and stuff. But it was a good wee thing that they added to the game. So as we go through the temple, Raziel explains that now he has this new Reaver power element on this Reaver, that he's able to go back to the Sarafan stronghold because he noticed that there was basically a door there with the same symbols that he was able to open. One thing that I wanted to say that I always found funny was when he was able to open these doors, the doors were, they don't just open and shut. It was like a whole orchestra. Opera singers were like, me, 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 every time a door opened and closed, every time you used it. And I just thought that was just so funny. So as he's leaving to go and head to back to the Sarafan stronghold to get entry to the door that he couldn't before, he walks into Vorador, who's like, you're a sorry excuse for a saviour if I ever saw one. So Vorador clearly knows that we're not a vampire, and he is a bit dubious the fact that we arrive at the same time when the pillars become corrupted. Now obviously Vorador has no idea who Raziel is, what his story is, and he is an ancient vampire, remember. He has been here a long time, he has been born a vampire, he knows about the Hildon, he was probably part of the battle, he knows about the Reaver, he used to own the Reaver, so he is wondering if Raziel is the cause of the pillars corrupting or if he's here to help the pillars. So he obviously knows what the vampires, the ancient vampires look like, the blue and the wings and man. He sees obviously a bit of that in Raziel, but also not completely because he's a more monstrous looking. So he's a wee bit suspicious at how Raziel looked. So Vorador asks, or basically says to Raziel that he doesn't know what he is. And Raziel explains to him he's been many things, but if he knows better to enlighten him. But, you know, Vorador's like, what's the point? And he goes on to say that 500 years of persecution for like the Sarafan and stuff like that, he's learned to basically not get involved with anything to stay alive. He doesn't think vampires should get involved with anything to do with the humans or anything like that. Because remember in Blood Omen, it was very different. Even though he was telling Kain not to get involved either. But at that time, he was like, vampires are gods, and basically, you know, the humans want to give up their blood to feed us and stuff like that because they see us as gods. He seems very different in this time than what he did, but it's 30 years before that time, remember. Because we know that it's Mobius who ends up killing Vorador by cutting his head off publicly. And at that time they thought Vorador was the last vampire, but it turned out it was Kain that was the last vampire by that point. So he just seems very different from what he did for the first Blood Omen when we see him. Here Vorador basically tells Raziel to forget everything that he's seen, that they're just fairy tales, you know, the depictions of him and all that sort of stuff. Well, depictions of the creatures that look like him, the battle, everything. He just tells them that they're fairy tales, they're no real depictions of what it used to be, but it's no new sort of thing. So yeah, Vorador's very, very different from what we see him later on in Blood Omen. So Vorador tells us that Janus Aldrin, the guardian of the Reaver, he calls him, which I'm taking it maybe he was the person who made the Reaver, and also Vorador's maker, so he made Vorador, had died at the hands of the Seraphim 5 centuries ago. And I'm guessing this is probably when we start time traveling back 500 years. But let's just wait yet. You know, we're not there yet, guys. With Vorador telling Raziel that the only way he's going to get answers is of speaking to Janus Aldrin, and basically they're both out of luck because obviously he was murdered 5 centuries ago and they stole the Reaver and blah blah blah, the Seraphim stole the Reaver and all that sort of stuff. This is Raziel's plan now. He wants to bring Janus Aldrin back so he can get the answers that he's looking for. So he goes back through where the Elder God is and basically tells him he's uncovered more stuff than what he would like him to uncover, and the Elder God is telling them that everything is a lie, he's been lied to, the depictions in the walls that he's seen is just for future people to be lied to, corrupted. And Raziel is basically like, oh, what are you going to do? I'm not within your reach. And Elder God tells him, you're closer to my reach than what you think. And then we continue on back to the Seraphim stronghold to get entry to the door, because we want to try and infiltrate one of the Mobius's time streams to go back in time 500 years. So within this temple, we see another more pictures, and one side it's showing the ancient vampires and the pillars behind them, which is basically Raziel says there's no doubt that the ancient vampires built the pillars. So Kain obviously wasn't lying about that. And then on the other side it's showing the Hildon being banished from the land because of the pillars. This is also the place where we figure out the puzzle to get the light element of our Reaver so we can continue on through the door. So we now have the means to go back into the stronghold. So when we go into the Seraphim stronghold, Raziel finds a dead body and straight away he knows that Kain's there. So he asks Kain to show himself, and Kain just simply says, I'm here. And he's standing where the William the Just's grave is, where the sword Soul Reaver is that we repaired before, and at the stained glass window. And he's simply, I think at this point Raziel tells him that he doesn't trust either him or Mobius, so he's cutting strings and he's gone his own path. Basically, he wants to go and find out about himself. And Kain tells him that we don't have a choice but to meet where we are, because it's how it was fate, you know. It's basically how it was destined, because we have all these different people within this game, all believing in different things. Raziel believes in free will. The Elder God believes in spinning the wheel of fate. And Kain believes in your destiny is your destiny and you can't change it. So we have these three different things that they all believe in. So he's telling the story about basically William the Just like I did earlier on here, telling you in the video that he was tricked by Mobius when he was obviously first turned into a vampire, so he would say he was younger in his youth, and that at the time Nosgoth was being attacked by William the Just, who was a tyrant, and he thought it was a good idea to go back in time because Mobius told him to do that, and because he believed Mobius and went back and killed him, he started a genocidal war against his own kind. Basically, that's how his own kind nearly became extinct by his own hands. And who profited from all of it was Mobius. He's picking up the Reaver while he's saying this. And Raziel's constantly saying, don't come any further, stay back, you know, I'm warning you. So he's explaining to Raziel that one thing that Mobius made sure today before he sent Kain back to kill William was to make sure that there was 2 Reavers in one place. So that meant Kain brought a Reaver back from his time, and William the Just owned a Reaver. 2 Reavers in one place caused a paradox, changed a story. That is the whole point. This game is all about paradox and changing stories. That's why when Blood Omen 2 came out, Blood Omen 2 is not depicted after Blood Omen 1. It's depicted after Soul Reaver 2 because of the change in the paradox that happens. Changed Kain's story. So, it's all about the Reaver. The Reaver is the key. So as he's explaining this to Raziel, he is holding the Reaver. So his Reaver, Raziel's Reaver starts reacting to the Sword Reaver that Kain's got. And Kain turns the Reaver around and hands it to Raziel and tells him that he has got nothing to fear from him. And then Raziel goes and puts his hand out to take the Reaver. So soon as Raziel takes the Reaver, nothing's happening. He seems to have control of it. But then he points it to Kain and says, if this is true, then you should be scared because I could kill you. And Kain says, and you do. And straight as soon as he says that, the Reaver goes straight for Kain. And Kain says, if you believe in free will, then this is your time to use it. He's telling Raziel to change history and at that time and not to kill Kain like he's supposed to within that time. So he's holding the Reaver back. And he's saying, this is madness to Kain. And Kain's saying, I was destined to be the balance guardian. And obviously it didn't go right. He says, you were always meant to be the saviour. And he tells him to fight it and not to kill him. This is his chance to prove free will and to change things. Kain is telling Raziel he can fight this, he can change. Raziel saying he can't, it's too strong. Kain says you can. Change our futures, change the destiny. And like that, he lifts up his sword and Kain embraces himself for impact, and instead of hitting Kain, he hits the tomb behind him that he's leaning up against. And he did it. He didn't kill Kain. At this moment, he used his free will and he changed destiny. So then we hear this great big rumbling and noise, and Raziel's like, what is that? What's going on? And Kain explains that that's the paradox. Everything's having to change because he refused to kill Kain. He didn't follow the fate, the destiny, and everything is shifting through time and changing through this. And this is how we end up with Blood Omen 2. And the story of Blood Omen 2 is because Raziel's refusal to kill Kain. And that's how the story changes, you know, going back in time with Kain, which obviously that's going to be the next game that we speak about is Blood Omen 2, so I'm not going to obviously speak about it now. But yeah, Raziel has basically used free will and changed things now. So Kain tells Raziel what he's done now has give Kain a chance to be able to be the Circle of Nine balance to the pillars. And hearing this, Raziel's kind of like, is this what the whole point was for that? You know? And he tells him he will not be a pawn in any more of his stories. He doesn't want to be involved with any more of it. He wants to find his own answers, and Kain simply tells him, on you go, then go and find your own secrets and answers that you were looking for. And Kain disappears and Raziel continues on with his journey. So as we're going to go in to go back 500 years, we meet Mobius, and he looks worried, and Raziel likes that, and he tells him he likes that look in his face because plans haven't went his way. And Mobius is trying to tell Raziel that he's not using his free will, he's basically still being a servant to Kain. And Raziel's saying, I didn't serve Kain, I simply didn't kill him. I used my free will. I made a choice and I choose not to kill him. So he basically takes Mobius into the portal and tells him to put it for 500 years, going back, because he wants it to be the time when Janos is still alive, Aldrin is still alive, but he is tricked again by Mobius, who jumps him forward 100 years. So pretty quickly, Raziel realises that he is not in the time that he had asked for, because the stronghold that he's in is basically falling to pieces, is derelict, and as he walks out one room into another, he sees a statue of Mobius holding Vorador's head. So this is after Kain killed him, and they've put a statue up in like memory of him for killing Vorador, because obviously he was like the last of the ancient vampires. So he knows pretty quickly that he was tricked. So remember earlier on where we were in the ruins and there was places that we saw that we could go, but there was like an obstruction, so we couldn't go. Well, in this time, Raziel reckons that if he goes to the same places, since it's in the future, those obstructions might be gone and he might be able to go to the mountains where he heard where Janos Aldrin used to live, and maybe find some clues to the story in at least the time that he's in just now. As we're about to leave this temple, who do we see but yet Mobius, but as a ghost, like a spirit? And straight away, he's still trying to convince us that that he's a good guy. He's trying to tell us that he had no choice but to trick us and, you know, leave us in the future, because he's like, look what, you know, look what you've done. Look about you, and you'll find out, like, your choice of no killing Kain has done. But, I mean, I don't think he really realises that that kind of stuff is kind of going to work on Raziel, considering the amount of lies that he has told him so far, but he's still trying. Raziel finally kind of says to Mobius that he doesn't think that the reason that they're trying to get Raziel to kill Kain is anything to do with the pillars or anything else, Nosgoth, Decay, whatever. He thinks it's because they are scared because they don't know what Kain's up to. He's like a wild card, he says to them, and they don't know what Kain's found out, what he's planning to do, and because of that, they're scared, and they're trying to use Raziel to kill him so they don't have to worry about him. So basically Mobius is like, you know, forget you, leave this place, let my spirit rest. And Raziel says, if you really are a spirit, but there's one way to be able to tell that, and he pulls his masks down, because obviously he's a soul eater, and straight away Mobius disappears, and Raziel says, yeah, I didn't think so, because either way you would lose. So Raziel is not going to be the pawn anymore, that's for sure. So we leave the temple, and again we see the pillars. Raziel now starts thinking that possibly it might have not just been Kain's refusal to sacrifice himself that have made the pillars corrupted, that it might be another kind of bigger, darker thing that he doesn't know yet. And he decides to speak to Ariel. They call her Ariel, but I'm calling her Ariel. I've always called her Ariel. So she's Ariel to me, not Ariel. And she's muttering away. She doesn't even notice Raziel, and she's muttering away about all the stuff that happened, the fact that she had died, she's stuck there, she's been stuck there for centuries, and Praptor gone mad because she was murdered, everybody went mad, and basically because she was murdered, she can't rest, and it's Kain's fault for no sacrificing himself. Ends up that Raziel says to her, you've been there too long, basically, and you know, you're basically starting to go mad yourself. And he tells her that possibly the reason that she's not moving on is because she's blaming Kain, when it could be another purpose to what is happening. Because this is the thing, Ariel is blaming Kain for not taking the sacrifice, but it was not Kain, because Kain wasn't even born when the pillars were corrupted. The pillars were corrupted because of the Hilden Lord, who possessed one of the guardians. Now, Raziel says here that one of the guardians asked for this. I'm not sure if that was at that time made clear in Blood Omen, that Mortanius, who was the guardian of death and was the one who ended up being possessed by the Hilden. I don't know if he wanted this, if it was, you know, if it was like he wanted to be powerful and he allowed the Hilden to possess him. I'm not sure, and I'm not even sure how this Hilden Lord managed to escape the realm while the pillars were still good, because the whole point of the pillars was to keep the Hilden in the demon realm, and they were only corrupted after that Mortanius was possessed and murdered Ariel. So I'm not quite sure if it's meant to be that Mortanius wanted more power, or wanted to control things, and he looked for the Hilden to help him at that time. I'm not sure, but we can't, Ariel's completely blaming Kain, and it's not completely Kain's fault that it was corrupted at on the first place. So Ariel doesn't like the things that Raziel's saying because it could be true, and she wants to blame Kain for it. So Raziel puts it to her this way. He says, well, what happens if Kain does die and it makes no change to the pillars? What if things are just far too late now and that she's going to be stuck there forever, no matter what? And to this, she looks horrified and she disappears, obviously to the spectral realm, but we can go to the spectral realm. So Raziel just goes to the spectral realm to continue this conversation. So when he goes to the spectral realm and he's basically, you know, trying to get answers for her, and she's like, why are you hounding me? She says, can you not see that I'm like, you know, a spirit and I'm tormented? And he says, did you show any, you know, any kind of remorse when you sent Kain to kill all the other guardians? Because when we think back, it was Ariel who told Kain to go and kill each of the guardians, including her lover, and get their token. She also did not tell Kain at that time, when she knew that Kain would have to kill himself for the pillars to be completely, you know, or Kain might have had that choice then and said, I'm having nothing to do with this. But she didn't tell him that. He was looking for a cure at that time for being a vampire. And she didn't tell him that, you know, he would have to die either way to stop being a vampire, and to help the pillars. She wanted him to do her dirty work. So she is not innocent in this, apart from obviously being murdered. I mean, that was never her fault. But after that, she used Kain the same as everybody else used him. So basically, he ends up leaving Ariel in peace because she asks him to. And he goes back to the vampire hold where the pillars were, and where Kain basically used to stand where they used to have the council. And underneath, obviously, is still the Elder God. And he calls Raziel the failed assassin and asked him why, you know, he basically didn't kill Kain, and told him to look at what's happened to the world because his refusal to kill Kain. So this is when Raziel basically says to the Elder God, you know, you're talking about the world being a wasteland, but yet he's still thriving, the Elder God. And the Elder God says, this is because I am, you know, what makes Nosgoth what it is, you know, I am the Wheel of Fate, blah, 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 the usual stuff that he normally tells us. And this is when Raziel says, or maybe you're just hungry. You're like a parasite. And I think this is when Raziel starts realising that the Elder God is not exactly what he makes out to be. So we go back to the point where we see that door again with the mark of the time streamer on it. And we still do, basically, Raziel still says that this at this point is his only hope, that he's hoping to be able to get in there at some point, to be able to get out of the horrible wasteland of time that he's in. And then he goes to the point where he saw before, where it was blocked, and it is now cleared in this time that he is able to continue on to Janis Aldrin's hideout, or wherever it is that he, temple, whatever it is that he lived in. So it ends up Raziel finds a small village, and this is the village that it was meant to be that Janis Aldrin terrorised. It's been long abandoned. So Raziel knows that if he's basically found that village, he is pretty close to where Janis Aldrin lived. So it ends up Raziel sees like an entrance clearly he knows it's to Janus Aldrin's building because it has like a statue depicted of a being with wings, but it's all collapsed, and he knows that there's no way that he is going to be able to get in there to find any kind of evidence of anything. So he knows that purposely Mobius sent him into that time so he couldn't find anything. So he decides to just basically try and look through the canyons that he's in just now to see if he can find any other kind of passageway. So as we were about to carry on exploring the canyons, we meet Kain again, and this is when Raziel's kind of like, wow, you're really, really bent and following me about. You've came like 100 years to the future to find me. And he's just there. He's basically warning him. He told him Janus Aldrin is a person that he needs to speak to basically find out the truth, but to warn him that because they're both there now, that they need to be careful. And Raziel is like, look, you're talking like we are no enemies. We are still enemies, you know. We're no friends or anything like that. But he's trying to make Raziel understand that Mobius is also just a puppet, you know, and that the people who are behind all this have not shown their faces yet, and that he needs to be careful because there's a bigger picture to all this. So we find another temple, and we find more depictions of obviously the ancient vampires and their blood curse that they get. And we also have to work out another puzzle, and this is to get the elemental air Reaver. So we should have like the dark, the light and air to be able to basically get into different places. And I'm taking it when we go back in time, we're probably going to get other ones like fire and things like that. But that's where we are so far. So we soon find out that the air Reaver allows us to break down anything that's stone, brick that has cracks. This means that we can now get back, and that bird is really loud and annoying, that we can now get back in and basically go back in time the 5 centuries that we wanted to. No, it'll be 6 centuries that we wanted to meet Aldous, to meet Janus Aldrin. Now, at this time, guys, you need to remember, Raziel does not know how to set the time on these things. Kain obviously does, but Raziel doesn't. So he's just taking blind faith that it's set to the right thing for him to be able to go at a time that Janus Aldrin is still alive. And it's a hell of a, risk, but he takes. So by the time that we come into, we're indeed in a time when the Sarafan are still alive, because there is flags with the Sarafan sign on them, and there is dead vampires everywhere. So Raziel finds this a bit too convenient that he has basically placed, on fate, and he has came to a time that where he wanted to be, but his main priority is to find Janus Aldrin. So on his way he meets some Sarafan, and he starts talking about his brothers and stuff like that, and how he feels different towards them now because he'd seen their faces of them as vampires and all this sort of stuff. And then after that, we finally come back to that winged creature that we saw as a statue before, but this time with it no being collapsed, which he said this was good because he knew that if Janos Aldrin was dead, it was probably the collapse was due to at that time that he was killed. But there's still a lot of Sarafin flags about, and still a lot of like spiked vampires and stuff like that. So his main goal is to find a way in, because Janos's balcony is high, because obviously they can fly, so it's easy for them to get in and out, but it's not so easy for people who can't fly. And as we know, Raziel's wings were ripped off by Kain, so they don't work like wings, they just kind of help us glide. We finally meet Janos Aldrin, and he knows us. Like, straight away he's like, Raziel, my son, what have they done to you? Like, and Raziel doesn't even go, how do you know me? He's like, I've been through hell and back, you know. And Janos tells us that there was 9 guardians chosen, but he was the 10th, and he was the guardian of the Reaver. So this is what it meant when Vorador told us that he was known as the guardian of the Reaver. There was 9 circle, but there was actually 10, and Janos was one of them. So Janos explains to us that the vampires were the people who were in control of the pillars, and he was the 10th guardian of the Reaver. And the more the vampires started to die off, then there was only Janos left. And Raziel says, why would the pillars pick humans to, you know, look after the pillars if they're made by vampires? And Janos says the pillars choose the people to look after the pillars at birth. And that's true, because Kain was chosen at birth to be the new guardian after Ariel was murdered. Because they had the blood curse from the Howden, vampires were no longer born. So they were immortal. So that's why the humans ended up getting chosen by the pillars, because it had to be by birth. And because the ancient vampires were cursed by the Howden, they couldn't be born. This was their ultimate revenge for building the pillars in the first place. So Janos is trying to explain that because vampires made the pillars, that they're the only ones who can really look after the pillars, and with the humans destroying all the vampires, they're cutting their own throat. So this is when Raziel asks Janos, does he hate humans for everything that obviously they've done? And Janos is like, no, because they don't understand. They don't understand the vampire ways. They don't understand anything. And this is when Raziel says Vorador hates them. And Janos says Vorador's been through a lot. And he finds it hard to forgive them. And Raziel simply asks, should they be forgiven? And Janos says, yeah, because they don't understand. So Janos is not a bad guy. Nobody depicted anyway, but he isn't a bad guy. So then Raziel says that what Kain and Vorador told him was true. He's some sort of unholy vampire messiah. And Vorador, Janos tells him, yeah, he's no unholy, but messiah, yeah. So this is when Janos tells Raziel that the pillars are the lock and the Reaver is the key. Now Janos has the Reaver there, and Raziel says at that time he felt nothing, you know, because normally his Reaver reacts to other Reavers, until Janos opens it and brings it out and hands it to him. Then he feels the most terrible dread and fear, and he asks Janos to take it away from him. And just like that, then the Sarafin burst in. So at this point, a whole bunch of Sarafin come in, and Janos tells Raziel that he has to save himself because obviously he's a messiah. So he transports him to another part of the safe, to where they are, to another room. to make sure they're safe. But all Raziel wants to do is make sure Janos is alright. So this is when Raziel realises that he has been tricked by Mobius the whole time. They used this time, and this is why the time was set before to the right time, to follow Raziel to be able to finally get to Janos. It was because of Raziel, because he had found a way and made a way to enter by using the stairs. He made stairs from the blood to get to Janos to speak to him, and the Sarafin were following. So it's his fault that he was killed, and then Mobius planned it all. So the only way the Raziel could get back to Janos is with the fire element, something that he didn't have at that time. He could hear through the door a battle between the Sarafin and Janos, but there was nothing he could do. He went away and he had to get the fire element to get back into the door. So we finally get the fire element and Raziel heads back to the door. He goes through, and what does he see? Himself and his brothers holding down Janos, and they're fighting with him. He's fighting a good fight, but then comes out Mobius' staff to immobilise him, and Raziel, the Sarafin priest, cuts out Janos' heart and kills him. So Raziel was the one who killed Janos when he was a Sarafin priest along with his brothers. And then when they pull his black heart out his chest, the Sarafin priest Raziel notices Raziel, our time Raziel, and is looking really confused by how he looks, but also like he recognises him in some sort of way. And they just stare at each other, but then the place starts to rumble and it's about to fall apart because we know it collapses because we'd seen it in the future collapsed. And they all then disappear outside of to get to safety. So Raziel quickly jumps down and he apologises to Janos for luring them there. You know, he didn't know he's been followed. He apologises and Janos tells him no, his purpose was to always make sure that Raziel was safe, and he did that. The Sarafin took the Reaver. He tells him he needs to get the Reaver back. The sole purpose of the Reaver is it was made for Raziel. He needs to get it. It's the key. So he tells him that he needs to go and get it. Without the Reaver, there is no hope. So now Raziel has a new hate, and it's no Kain, it's himself and his brothers as Sarafin priests. He now wants revenge for them killing Janos. And obviously then he could retrieve the heart and bring Janos back. So he is now going to head back to the Sarafin stronghold to retrieve the Reaver, kill the Sarafin priests, probably himself, and to retrieve the heart. So when Raziel's leaving Janos's place, we see the first Hilden monsters, two monsters who say to him, "We've been waiting for you." And this is because the Hilden have got a plan for Raziel themselves. They want to like possess Raziel and use them under their control, just like what they did with Mortanius. So these are the people suddenly appearing that Kain had said there was a higher force and they haven't shown their faces yet. It's the Hilden. So when we finally get into the Sarafin stronghold, the Reaver's just basically sitting there in front of us, and Raziel's feeling like it's a bit of a trap. He's feeling that dread again. But he's also feeling compelled to pick it up, and he goes to pick it up, and who comes through the door but Mobius and Malik. Yeah, remember Malik when Malik was alive? He was one of the Guardians before, and he was meant to be the protector of all the other Guardians. So Mobius this time is being Mobius. He's no lying. He basically laughs at Raziel, tells him that he's basically been played as a pawn. He led them straight to Janos, and then he tells Malik not to let Raziel leave the room. Now, before Mobius leaves, he basically tells Raziel that he's basically been stupid because he knew every single move before Raziel did because he's a time streamer. But then we hear a familiar sound. We hear somebody shouting, Malik! And we hear Vorador's laugh. And this is because this is the beginning of Blood Omen. At the beginning of Blood Omen, we see Vorador basically coming in and killing 6 of the circle of 9, and them constantly screaming on Malik to come and help them. Malik wants to go and help the others. Mobius is telling Malik to stay where he is, and this is why Malik ends up being too late to help 6 of the circle. Mobius planned for 6 of the circle to be killed, because when he hears Vorador's voice, he tells him not to worry about it. This was a plan. This was all planned. And poor Malik is the person who ends up getting punished for Myrtanius, who takes away his flesh and just leaves him as armour because he says he doesn't deserve the pleasures of flesh for letting 6 to be killed. It was Mobius's fault. So now we pick up the Reaver. We picked up the Reaver to threaten Mobius. But Raziel doesn't remember picking up the Reaver, he says after they leave and they close the door. He doesn't even remember actually picking it up, but he says he likes to feel it. And the fact that he can't use his Wraith Blade because of the staff, it's the option that he goes for, which is good because we get a chance to actually play with the old Reaver sword. So now he's met up with 2 of his brother, Micaiah and Zephron, and he recognises them straight away, and he's just basically reminiscing the fact that they are never going to realise that, you know, their death is going to be by him, and the fact that they're going to be turned into the very thing that they hate. And he says that he can feel the hum of the Reaver lusting for their blood. He kills them pretty quickly because they were the lowest of getting Kain's soul. So basically he's going to go through and he's going to kill everybody, facing Raziel himself at the end. Now we face Duma and Rahab, and they're asking him if he's here to collect the monster's heart. He's just slowly going to kill every single one until he's faced with himself. Then he faces his brother Turel, which was one of the brothers who actually threw him into the abyss without a second thought. So he really is enjoying killing his brothers, and he's loving the fact that he's thinking back that it was actually him, his hand, who killed his brother for a second time, only for Kain to resurrect them as the things that they hate. So here we are face to face with ourselves, and I just love how they do this because the guy who plays Raziel does not change his voice for either of them. He just keeps it the way it is. And basically the Seraphim Raziel says, so you've killed my brethren and you're here basically to kill me. I'm not going to be so much easy prey. And Raziel says he doesn't want to kill him, just return him the heart and he'll leave. And the Seraphim Raziel was like, oh, you're basically here to avenge that beast. You're a righteous so-and-so. And Raziel replies, apparently I am. And then they just continue on kind of conversing, and the Seraphim Raziel is really cocky and thinking that he's going to win this, and then they start fighting. So Raziel kills himself as a Raziel Seraphim, and as he stabs him he says, I renounce you. And with that, Raziel's like, that's the end, my life has came full circle. With that, Raziel says that he feels the Soul Reaver leave him, and we see that the coil that he has round his arm has disappeared, and it's just coiled round the sword that he's holding, Soul Reaver sword. And then he realises he's in trouble, because now that he's killed everybody, the sword has turned itself on Raziel and it's trying to kill Raziel. So, this is when Raziel realises that, or why he never felt anything before when Janos brought out the sword, was because knew that the sword's inside Raziel, like it's literally in his chest, that the sword wasn't forged for Raziel, that Raziel is the soul of the sword, and this is basically it reclaiming its soul into the sword. This is also the reason why the sword broke when Kain struck Raziel in Soul Reaver, was because the Soul Reaver cannot consume its own soul, so instead it broke into pieces. So it's Raziel's realisation that basically this is what he's going to be doing, is just reliving this over and over again. He sees Kain appear from behind one of the pillars, just like he did in Blood Omen, by the way, if we remember that. And he's angry. He's saying, was this your destiny for me all the time? You know, are you enjoying watching us? Because he's like really struggling to survive here. And Kain's telling him to stop fighting, just be still, to trust him. And just when he's about to be completely eaten by the sword, I mean his soul, no actually him, Kain pulls the sword out of Raziel's chest. And why did Kain pull the sword out? Kain waited to the time where Raziel's soul was out of his body and partly in the sword. It was the time of the paradox. This was the coin edge that basically Kain was talking about, and this is why he waited until this very moment where he pulled out the sword, because he knew that this could possibly change time. At that moment, he pulls the sword at Raziel. He says, now you can be free to reclaim your true destiny. And with that, we hear that familiar sound that we heard before when a paradox was, when obviously Raziel refused to kill Kain. And we see an expression on Kain's face with like new memories coming in and out in him. And he looks scared. And then he says this, oh my God, the Hilden. We walked right into that. The last thing that Kain says to Raziel before he basically disappears into the spectral realm because he's too weak to sustain his body is that Janos Aldrin must stay dead. And then Raziel disappears. And then that's where it ends, guys. Soul Reaver 2. Basically, once again, Raziel and Kain walked into some sort of trap and were some sort of pawn where we basically have let the Hilden free. I think the Hilden might be free now by the looks of it. But also the future of Kain's past has changed, so we are going to be doing Blood Omen 2 next. Before we're on to our very last Legacy of Kain Defines, where will be good because we get to play both Raziel and Kain in that. This was a really long video, guys, and it'll probably get even longer when it comes to editing. I hope you enjoyed this. I loved Soul Reaver 2. I loved everything about it. I loved the story. I loved the voice acting. The voice acting's always been good in these games. I love the fact that we got to see Raziel and his brethren as Seraphim. I love the fact that we got to see Raziel come full circle in his story. I loved the fact that Mobius, every single time, his character kept changing because half the time he was putting on a different face. But when we see him at the very end we see the real Mobius. So guys, with that, I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, leave me a like, leave me a comment. If you're new to my channel and you enjoy my PC and VR content, please subscribe, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye bye.